in listen-only mode.
Hello and good morning, and I would like to welcome everyone here to our live webinar on Food Information Regulation titled New Food Labelling Regulations December 2014, What You Need to Know, sponsored by Group Learner Limited in partnership with Food Safety Solutions and Quality and Hygiene Solutions Limited. My name is Anne-Marie Doohan and I'm Senior Account Manager with Group Learner, and I will be your facilitator today. Okay, so we're all aware the clock is ticking, and as of the 13th of December of this year, this EU regulation known as number 1169-2011, often referred to as the FIC, which is the Food Information to Consumers, or the FIR, the Food Information Regulation, what it's actually going to become known as when it comes into law. Whatever acronym you choose to select, there's no doubt that there will be implications for your site. Some mandatory information that you'll need to be made available to consumers include minimum text size, lists of ingredients highlighting allergens, country of origin, place of provenance. So to help answer these questions, and also others already submitted by our audience earlier, we have assembled two experts that no doubt know the A to Z of the FIR. In order of appearance, in which we will hear from them today, we have Eileen Morgan, who is Director of Food Safety Solutions. Eileen holds a Master's in Food Safety Management from Dublin Institute of Technology. She's worked as a quality technician with the likes of Premier Foods and Greenell Foods. And she's also an approved trainer with McDonald's and is the nominated auditor for the National Dairy Council. Speaker number 2 is Rose Hibbets, who is Director of Quality and Hygiene Solutions Limited. Rose holds a Master's in Food Safety Management also. She's registered with many of the leading institutions as an approved food safety trainer and has extensive audit experience and compliance to standards such as the BRC and the ISO 22000. Before I hand you over to Eileen, I'd like to make all our attendees aware, should you wish to ask any questions throughout the session, you can so do by simply typing in the question panel on the screen in front of you, and we will try to get to these at the end. So I'm just going to hand you over now to Eileen, who will take you through all things labelling.
Okay, thanks for that, Anne-Marie, and welcome to everybody who's logged in for today's session. It's great to see so many different companies that have joined this webinar. As Anne-Marie said, I'm Eileen Morgan, and between myself and Rose, hopefully we can add some clarity to this new food information regulation which comes into force in December of this year. So what I'm going to cover with you, or what we will both cover with you today, is the journey to this labelling regulation, how it came about. We'll talk about the current food labelling requirements and compare it against the new food information regulation which is coming in, why this regulation has been brought in, and the key changes within this new food information regulation. So we'll pick the key elements of it that will be affecting businesses. We'll talk about the application of the new regulation, and we'll also provide you with some resources of where to get further information. There's a lot of information out there for food businesses that's easy to access, provided by the authorities, so to make use of that. Okay, so just to explain how this new food information regulation came about. The first directive on food labelling we had was the 79112 EEC. And that was really the start of putting together a framework of what information was required on food labels. This was updated considerably then with the introduction of the European Directive on Labelling and Presentation of Foodstuffs, which was a 2013 EC directive, and this was a very comprehensive review of how food should be labelled, and a lot of this information carries through now to the new food information regulation. Why this information regulation came into play was really because food is now sold in various different ways, not just in retailers but online and through your iPads and iPhones, etc. So anywhere that consumers can buy their food, this same information needs to be provided. It also ties in with the nutritional labelling requirements of the 496 EEC and the General Food Law, which was the major transition with the white paper which came in with the 178 of 2002. So it's quite detailed, and as I said, it's rather than calling it a labelling regulation, it is an information regulation. So it's making sure that whatever way food is sold to consumers, that this information is provided very clearly. As Anne-Marie said, it's either referred to as the FIR or the FIC, Food Information Regulation or Food Information to Consumers. And the law has already been passed. It was passed 3 years ago with a 3-year transition to allow companies to change their labels and review all their packaging. And this deadline is approaching within the next few months. So by middle of December, the regulation comes into force. There's still a significant number of implementation acts that have to be brought in by the Commission and by Member States to provide guidance to the industry on displaying some of this information, and I suppose everybody's eagerly waiting on that information. Okay, so just to explain briefly the objective of labelling, which doesn't change. The objective really is to make sure the consumers know the exact nature and characteristics of their foodstuff, which allows them to make an informed choice when purchasing their food. And that objective is still there. I suppose with this regulation, it's trying to make sure that this is absolutely clear when people are buying their food, that they know the exact characteristics of what's in the food that they're eating. It is quite complex, the amount of information that has to go onto labels now, and I suppose testament to that is some statistics from the Food Safety Authority which show that in 2012 they had 914 queries on labelling, and more than half of these came from the food industry. So I suppose it's clear that many businesses are trying their best to comply with the regulations, but it is proving difficult, and they're contacting the authorities to get further information. So I think we should be using the resources that we have with either the Food Safety Authority here or the Food Standards Agency in England to get further information as we need it. Okay, so labelling and presentation on advertising of foodstuffs, and this is from the 2013, which again still applies to products, is that labels must be clear, unambiguous. They must not mislead the consumer to a material degree. They should be legible, easy to understand, and they should be in English. You are permitted other languages on labels, but in the English-speaking countries, English must be on the labels. Okay, so that still applies. So moving on to then, why was this regulation brought in? So really, I suppose the aim of it is to make sure the consumers know the exact nature and characteristics of their foodstuffs. So as I said, it expands on the way the food information could be considered misleading. So I suppose currently some companies might suggest that their food possesses some special characteristics that maybe competitors' products don't, when in fact similar products would have the same characteristics. So it's really to iron out all that and make sure that consumers are not being misled in any way. So it's to simplify and modernise the legislation, as we said, making sure that the information is available through distance selling of food, making sure there's more informed choices for customers as well. So with the introduction of the nutritional information, that they can see that the fat content and calorie content of the food that they're eating. Legibility of the label, very important, and that's why they've brought in minimum font size, which we'll go through. And they've also brought through stricter requirements on allergens, in particular for non-prepacked food. Distance selling of food, as we mentioned, and also considerable changes on origin labelling of food as well. So as I said, it really recognises that the food label is not the only means of communicating information on food to consumers. It's every way that we buy food now, through the internet, iPads, and also then providing that information even to consumers, especially on allergens if they're buying their food in hotels, restaurants, and then kids in schools, etc. So the responsibilities of the Food Information Regulation, so who has to provide this information? So what the regulation says is that it covers business operators at all stages of the food chain concerning provision of information to consumers. So it's food intended for the final consumer, food delivered by mass caterers, and foods intended for supply to mass caterers. So this information has to be passed all the way through the food chain. How that can be done for non-prepacked food is to make sure that the information is transmitted by the food business operator or to the food business operator who is receiving the food. So if the information is not on the label in regards to allergens, this information can appear on commercial documents that accompany the food. But the mandatory information must be provided to the final consumer. Okay, so if we look at the legal requirements currently under the 2013 regulations, you can see that under the current regulations and comparing it against the Food Information Regulation, that the name of product legally has to be there, the list of ingredients in descending order of weight. Allergen information is required currently. How that is to be displayed has been reviewed with this Food Information Regulation. Quid information is still required, which is your quantity ingredient declaration of the main ingredients in your products, then a quantity of the food, the durability dates, still the same, storage instructions the same, and name and address of the business. Country of origin at the moment is not required unless its omission would mislead the consumer. This is now required under the Food Information Regulation for additional types of products. Instructions for use is still a requirement, alcohol strength is a requirement, and nutritional declaration currently not required unless you're making a health claim or a nutritional claim. This will now be required with the new FIR. There's a longer transition period for this, which is into 2016, but Rose will explain this to you when it gets to her slides. So the key changes that we'll talk about in this presentation include the minimum font size requirements, product name, origin labelling, the allergens, distance selling, nutritional information, and then we're going to pick a few of the other mandatory information that's required under this. There's quite a few changes, and we've picked out what we consider are the key ones that food businesses listening in today would be interested in. Okay, so in regards to font size, so this is covered under Article 9 of the regulations. The mandatory particulars are that firstly the information on the label has to be clear and legible, and for that reason they have brought in a minimum font size of 1.2 millimeters. I suppose in real terms that means in Times Roman equivalent to an 8 font size. If you're looking at packages that are smaller than 80 centimeters squared, then the X height has to be at least 0.9 millimeters. For multi-packs then, so for small packages that are supplied to mass caterers, the mandatory particulars would be, where they're too small, must appear on the multi-pack package, so they can be on the outside of a bulk package which is going into mass caterers. Okay. What the regulations have also said is that mandatory particulars must be on the product. So any voluntary information must not be displayed to the detriment of the space available for mandatory information. So I suppose manufacturers, retailers are trying to sell their foods. They wanted to stand on the shelves with various pieces of eye-catching claims. The requirement on SFIR is that the mandatory particulars must be clearly visible. They shouldn't be hidden or obscured or detracted or interrupted by written or any pictures, pictorial matter that could display, confuse the mandatory particulars. So its legibility is very important. Determining then what is the largest surface area when you're talking about shapes that are not your usual, like square or rectangular type products. You're looking at bottles and cans. You're looking at a pragmatic way to clarify the concept of what is the largest surface area. So you have to look at areas that exclude the tops and bottoms of flanges at the top and bottoms of cans, and taking out the shoulders of necks of bottles and jars as well, and looking at that as your largest surface area to display the information on the label. Okay, another requirement is that the physical condition of the product should be displayed, or the specific treatment which has gone under. So if it's a powdered product or a quick frozen product, for example, that should be displayed on the label. If the foods have been frozen before sale, so if they're sold defrosted, then the date of freezing should be expressed as frozen on, so it was previously frozen. So you need to say the date for that, frozen on whatever date. And then if it's a joint of meat or fish which has the appearance of cut or joint of meat, then the presence of water must be included if that water makes up more than 5% of the weight of the finished product. So it's really to make sure the consumers are not being misled to think that something is a pure joint of meat, where in fact there's considerable water added to the product. Country of origin then. So currently country of origin is mandatory for beef, fish, honey, olive oil and fresh fruit. This has now been extended to the meat of pigs, sheep, goats and poultry, and that goes into force on the 1st of April 2015. Currently country of origin really only would have to be declared at the moment if its absence could mislead the consumer as to the true origin of its product. But now, for these additional products, country of origin will have to be included. It does probably get a little bit complicated then when you have various species in a product, or where the country of origin is given, but it's not the same as a primary ingredient, which can account for more than 50% of the food. In that case, the country of origin would also be required. So there's still legislation and implementation acts that are required to come through from the EU Commission on how this information should be displayed, and I suppose member countries will be bringing in their own guidance on this as well. The Commission are also looking at submitting a report on other types of meats other than beef, swine, sheep, goats and poultry. And they're looking at country of origin as well for milk, and milk is an ingredient in dairy products, unprocessed foods, single ingredient foods and ingredients that represent more than 50% of a food. So there's a report due from the Commission in December of this year to clarify on that. Okay, in regards to allergens then, the allergen list stays the same, which is in the 2013 EC, which we'll cover on the next slide. However, the way the allergens have to be declared has changed, and they will have to be in the list of ingredients now, and they have to stand out in the list of ingredients. So they must be, on Prepack Food, they must be emphasised to either the typeset, which distinguishes it from the rest of the ingredients. So, you know, the font, the style, the background colour for the allergen must stand out. So if you look at something like you know, casein, and you would have in brackets beside it milk in bold letters or a different colour or background colour. And we have some information and some examples of this in the white paper which accompanies this webinar, so you'll get more details on that. These are the allergens then, which is currently required under the 2013 regulations, so that list still stays the same. So any cereals containing gluten, crustaceans, eggs, peanuts, soybeans, milk, nuts, celery, sesame seeds, sulfur dioxide, fish, mustard, lupin and mollusks, and I suppose any derivatives thereof. There's a lot of information and good guidance documents on this, which we will go through with you at the end, but the BRC have guidance document on this, and the Food Standards Agency have just come out with, in the UK, with a document which goes through more detail on these allergens and the products thereof that can contain these types of allergens. So again, very good resource of information. Currently, I suppose a lot of companies would use allergen boxes for displaying the information on allergens. So really now allergens have to be displayed in the list of ingredients instead, and as I said, they have to stand out bolded. I suppose also as part of that, for a lot of companies might bold the word ingredients and then get the list of ingredients. Ingredients shouldn't be bolded, so that it's purely the allergens that stand out has been bolded. So the allergen advice box is now been used really by a lot of companies just to advise the consumer where to find the information on allergens on the label. May contain statements then, so the Commission again is coming out to adopt rules on information on the possible and unintentional presence in food of substances or products identified as allergens. So there's more information to come from the Commission on this. Okay, so this is just an example to show you how the allergens should be highlighted in the list of ingredients. You know, where something maybe is not clear to a consumer that it may have the allergen in it, you need to put it in brackets beside it that it does contain the allergen. And this is an example from the BRC guidance document. I suppose for very small packs, so if you're talking about a pack that is less than 10 centimeters squared, you wouldn't be required to put in the ingredient information, but you are required to put the allergen information. So there is a very big focus on making sure the allergen information is available to all consumers. Information on allergens then for non-pre-packed food, so food sold in catering establishments, also has to be provided. So how this information should be communicated to consumers is also important. So like a lot of companies, you may provide the information on menus, like in McDonald's where it's provided on tray liners, it might be on labels, notice boards. Regardless, this information will have to be available to the consumer. And if it's not, you know, practical to have it in a written format, then the information can be provided orally through members of staff. However, the information that the staff is using must be a clear document, a written document, which has the products, the meals, and the list of allergens beside it, so that it can be checked, I suppose, by the authorities. So very important will be staff training on allergens, that they know what the allergens are, and if there's a change to a recipe, that the allergen information is updated. So it won't be sufficient to say that all foods may contain allergens. And as I said, a lot of companies would currently put, if anybody does have an allergy and intolerance, to ask a member of staff for their allergen information. So typically you might have a blackboard which will have your list of sandwiches and then not necessarily the ingredients, but what allergens it contains to fulfill your legal obligations. So in Ireland here, the Department of Health have issued a draft implementation guidance on this for displaying allergen information on food sold loose. It is still in draft format. It has gone back for review, and we await guidance on that. Distance selling then, so this is a big change with this FIR, is that any pre-packed food sold, any pre-packed food sold, let's go back. Any pre-packed food sold through the internet must meet the same information requirements as food sold in the shops. So anybody buying food online has to be able to get this information. So before the purchase is completed, all the mandatory information must be available, apart from the date of minimum durability, which should be available at the moment the food is delivered, will have the minimum durability date on it. So this same information is required for customers buying online. Excuse me, the throat is going, so it's a good thing that Rose has taken over now. And I'll hand you over to Rose, who'll talk to you about nutritional declaration application.
Thank you, Eileen, and a big hello to everybody who's taken the time out today to share this learning with us. As Eileen said, I'm going to take over now and talk about nutritional labelling. So I suppose before we start out, putting nutritional information on labels is not exactly new, but from the 13th of December 2016, what information and how it's laid out will be mandatory. However, before we go into this slide, it's interesting to look at some of the statistics to do with underpinning this legislation. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease are now categorized as global epidemics, with cardiovascular disease as our #1 killer. So I suppose we'll all agree that good nutrition is the cornerstone of good health, and hopefully this directive will provide information in the correct format to give customers the correct choice. So focusing in then on this slide, does it apply to all foods? No, it doesn't apply to food supplements, doesn't apply to natural mineral waters, and we have a list further down in the presentation of more foods where it doesn't apply. So you do have a little bit of time, as Eileen said, unless you're declaring a specific health claim. You do have until the 13th of December 2016, so now is a good time to be running down packaging and labelling. But between the 13th of December 2014 and the 13th of December 2016, where nutritional labelling is provided on a voluntary basis, then it must obviously comply with the new regulation. It's important to note also that the nutrient and health claims legislation will change in the 13th of December 2014. So foods making a claim which triggers a mandatory nutrient declaration must be labelled with the declaration in accordance with the new rules. And this will apply also to fortified foods. So let's just look at how this is going to be laid out and what the information and the mandatory information should be. So you can see down on the left-hand corner the format that we're accustomed, and you can see then on the right-hand side the new regulation. So it must be, I suppose, starting on the top right-hand corner there, must be displayed per 100 grams or per 100 mils. And then the order is changed, so fat is now after energy and protein has moved down. It also must be declared in kilojoules and kilocalories. You might be accustomed in the past to just looking at calories, but now it's kilojoules and kilocalories. Fiber is out, and following fat then we have carbohydrates, of which are sugars, followed by proteins, and then sodium, you can see now, has to be referenced by salt. And I suppose again, just to understand where that's coming from, our average salt intake here in Ireland, believe it or not, is up at 10 grams according to the FSAI Salt and Health Review. I'm not too sure from other countries what it is, but you know, according to the WHO, we need to get that down to at least 4 or 5 grams. You can see there again the reference intake. The RDAs are now replaced by the NRVs, which is the nutrient reference values, and these are labelled as a percentage of RI, which stands for reference intake. So then adding to that, then you can put on some supplementary nutritional information, and these are monounsaturates, polyunsaturates, polyols, starch, and fiber. So let's start with the top two, the monounsaturates and polyunsaturates. These are particularly important given what we said there about cardiovascular disease, because people want to know if this is particular your product, you know, that the amount of good fats they're consuming, because obviously it has a lowering effect on cholesterol, especially the bad cholesterol, the LDL. And then the polyols, the starch and the fiber, that comes under the carbohydrates or macronutrient. And then any vitamins or minerals listed in the annex must also be declared. And again, we'll be going into more specifics later on. So I suppose typically, to summarize this slide, your nutritional declaration must be in a tabular format, and as a minimum have the mandatory energy, fats, saturates, carbohydrates, protein and salt. And then if it's your particular product and there's a benefit, you can supplement it with this information here. Okay, if you decide then in addition to put front of pack labeling, you have two choices here. You can put in the energy alone, which is the kilojoules and kilocalories, or you can put in energy, fat, saturates, sugar and salt, which is your energy plus 4. And it must be repeated on the label per 100 gram or per 100 ml. And if you're putting in per portion, it must be in a format that we can all understand, which is obviously maybe 2 biscuits, 2 rashers. And if you look at the next slide here, this will probably be something that you're accustomed to seeing here. So clearly you can see there are 16 servings. It's got the energy value, the 460 kilojoules. It's got the percent fat, saturates, sugar and salt, and this is the typical traffic light situation. Important to note, where you're providing nutritional information as a percentage of RI, you must add a statement, reference intake of average adult, 8,400 kilojoules or the equivalent 2,000 kilocalories. And this then can be put into portion size as well. So we already talked about what are the exceptions to the regulation for mandatory nutritional declaration. So it's not required for unprocessed products that comprise a single ingredient, waters, herbs, spices, salt, yeast, chewing gum, small packages less than 25 centimeters, or some handcrafted foods directly supplied to the final consumer. Again, just to let you know, if you go to the annex, there's a full list there of the exceptions. So we've taken out some of the interesting things from the annex just to explain now that the reason, I suppose, how it's going to be laid out and also the reason for it. Starting with aspartame. So contains aspartame is required on the label if only referenced as an E number on ingredients list. And aspartame, just to kind of explain, is a low-calorie sweetener. It's used in a wide variety of reduced-calorie foods. But certain individuals are sensitive to the phenylalanine in it. It's a rare inherited metabolic disease known as PKU. And then caffeine. Beverages with high caffeine content, now in excess of 150 milligrams, must indicate high caffeine content. Not recommended for children or pregnant or breastfeeding women. It must be in the same field of vision as the name of the beverage, followed by the caffeine content in brackets. And also for it includes like supplements containing caffeine and caffeine, in particular energy drinks. I suppose to explain the rationale for that is our recommended intake is somewhere in the region of 400 milligrams. So for anybody who's picked up your espresso macchiato today, that's 150 grams. Or if you're like me on the Vendis, well, you know you've exceeded your quota already, taking in 415. So we'll all be checking now our caffeine content and checking how much we're consuming in a day. Also on ionizing radiations, generally customers want to know if their food is irradiated or not. Foods are being treated, and if that is the case, foods treated with ionizing radiation shall include one of the following indications: irradiated or treated with ionizing radiation. So it's been, irradiation really, processing has been researched extensively and is now used worldwide for many food commodities. And, it's successful insofar as it extends shelf life and reduces pathogenic bacteria and eliminates parasites. but still if it's on the food, customers need to know that it has been irradiated. Also for hydrolyzed proteins, the origin is required, and for just to explain, hydrolyzed proteins are proteins that have been broken down into their component amino acids. They're used, I suppose, particularly to round off the taste of soups and sauces and meat products. And again, if you do use them, or if that's your product, then the origin has to be specified. Also for products that have nanomaterial, ingredients must now be followed by the word nano. And then for mincemeat, the specific requirements concerning the designation of mincemeat. This really relates to the percentage of fat and the collagen to meat proteins, and there is a full list explained in the annex, and it's also has been there already in 853. So moving on from there, fats and oils. The generic term of vegetable oil or fat is no longer permitted. The specific oil or fat now must be declared. So typically you could have vegetable oil, and then in brackets you could have rapeseed or palm, and if it's hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, that must now be included. And similarly then with fat protein. And again, we now have people on various different diets, and vegans in particular then want to know, the source of the fats they're consuming. Eileen already talked about the field of vision, so I suppose just to clarify what the field of vision is, a definition could be that all the surfaces of a package that can be read from a singular viewing point. And the three items now under this new regulation would be the name of the product, the net quantity, and the alcohol by volume. The date of minimum durability, which is either the use by date or the best before date, will be no longer required in that field of vision. So that's a change there. So when does this all come about? Well, as Eileen said, this came initially with the 3-year transition period in December 2011. The new rules will apply from the 13th of December 2014, and then there's a 5-year lead-in to nutritional labelling to the 13th of December 2016. That is unless you have a claim or you're making a health statement, like low fat, low sugar or something like that currently. Product labelled in accordance with the new regulations can be placed on the market, as I said before, December 2014, once it does not conflict with the current labelling requirements. So they still apply, the 2013 EEC regulation. So there's lots of information out there. The Commission Q&A on the application of Regulation 1169/2011, January 13 is there. Eileen made reference to the BRC guidance on allergen labelling. It's a good document. And then the Food Standards Agency Allergen Information on Food Sold Loose. There's also the DEFRA Food Information Regulations 2014 draft guidance, and then the Guide to Creating Front-of-Pack Nutritional Labelling for Pre-pack products sold through retail outlets. We're also going to be running some group learner site-specific workshops. We're hoping that this has been a good overview, but every company has their own specific process and has their own specific labeling issues, and that's really what we're going to be covering off in the workshops. So I think what I'll do is I'll hand over to Anne-Marie, and she'll take it from here. Thank you, everybody. We can all check now our size of our font size in our alphabet soup here while we're waiting for Anne-Marie.
Yeah, thank you, Rose, and thank you, Aileen, for that. So it has become apparent with the amount of questions that we've been asked here this morning. There is a massive thirst for information on this topic. So we're going to try to get to some of the questions that we've been asked this morning. So we have one question in from Melissa, who is quality manager at a bakery. Aileen, I think this is one for you. So the question is, If a product has negligible nutrients like water, can the nutritional table be left off the label, or a statement made contains negligible fat, proteins, etc.?
Okay. I don't think that one was from the bakery. I think that was from the water company that had the question on the negligible nutrients. So if it's water is exempt from the declaring nutritional information, again, unless it's mineral water, and then you do have to declare the minerals and the nutritional information that's in it. So yeah, so water is exempt from the nutritional declaration, unless it's mineral water and the minerals have to be labelled.
Okay, thank you, Eileen, for that. I have another question here, and it's been asked by Sue, who is technical manager at a fresh food producer. Rose, I think this one might be for you. So the question is, we are horticulture and the horticultural industry. Tomato grower, to be specific, do we have to mention allergens?
Well, the simple answer is if there's no allergen in the product, then there's no allergens required to be labeled as such. So, you know, if there's no allergen, then the answer is no.
Okay. And Eileen, one for you. It's been asked by Dave, who is HR manager at a beef producer. Is pre-packed fresh produce exempt from declaring any nutritional information?
Okay, so if it's fresh produce and it's a single ingredient, then it is exempt from, again, nutritional information. So if it's a single ingredient, herbs and spices, the full list is in the annex at the back of the legislation. It is exempt. So I think that should answer the question on that.
Okay, thank you. And just our final question, as we seem to be running out of time there. Rose, this has been asked by Gina, who is Learning and Development Manager from a dairy producer. With regards to voluntary nutritional labelling of minerals, what is considered a significant amount which will allow minerals to be labelled?
Now, this is a very interesting one. Okay. And, you know, significant, a lot of people want to know about what the significant amount is. So it's calculated as 15% of the nutrient reference value per 100 gram or per 100 mil. And that's in the case of products other than beverages. And then for beverages, it's 7.5% of the nutrient value per 100 mil or per 100 grams. Just to let you know, there are very specific tables in the annex. If you see Article 30 and 2, Article 32, Article 3 and Article 33 of Annex 8, there are groups of tables with specific products, and it's calculated out already for you the amount of you know, that must be required in the specific product. So a good reference point maybe would be to go to that.
Okay. Thank you, Rose. Okay, so don't worry if we haven't got to your question today. All queries will be answered directly by our consultancy team. So I'd like to give a big thank you today to our speakers, Eileen Morgan from Food Safety Solutions, and Rose Hibbets from Quality and Hygiene Solutions. And ultimately, I'd like to thank you, our audience, for taking the time to join us today. I hope you found the webinar informative, and I hope you've learned something that you can take away and possibly implement on your own site. I'd also like to make you aware that all participants will also receive a white paper outlining all the issues that Rose and Eileen have run through today. So if there's anything, there's just one thing that I can recommend you do, is become good friends with your printer. Mm-hmm. For anyone that would like more information on any of the topics covered today, as Rose mentioned, there is a site, there are site-specific workshops available and more information on these to follow. So again, thanks for your time today, and until next time, take care.